Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Seven, live from Jerusalem with Rabbi Aaron Dovid Poston. It's such a joy that he's teaching us the 48 ways to wisdom. And today we got part 15. We did miss him last week because of Purim, but the last several lessons have been just great. I encourage everybody to go back, check them all out. Go back to the very first. You'll see they're just building upon thought after thought after thought for wisdom that you can integrate into everyday life. And it's just a joy that he's willing to share them with us. So let's just jump right in, see how the rabbi's doing. Rabbi Poston, I know it's getting late there in Jerusalem. Thank you so much. And we missed you last week, but we're glad to be with you today.
I'm so glad to be back. We had a fantastic Purim here, and it was a lot to prepare. So I'm sorry I couldn't, multifunction as much as I wish I could. Also, Pesach is coming up, and we hopefully will be doing a tremendous amount of good for the community. Beforehand, it takes a lot of coordination, so we'll probably be covering the next 2 weeks and then taking a break, I think. We'll see how it goes. At least the next 2 weeks. Then closer to Pesach, we'll have to take a shorter break and then get back into things.
Exciting. I love the last message. The last 3 or 4 have just been profound.
Thank you. I mean, it's really not me, as we know, with North Weinberg. And it's so funny. My parents sent me, they had moved homes, so they downgraded, and they sent me a package of all these pictures. So I actually sent you by email. I don't know. This is me with Rav Noach Weinberg. I think it was in 1989.
Wow.
I think that's when I was, So I was a lot thinner.
The glasses were bigger back then, too.
Oh, the glasses were much bigger, right?
Remember the 70s? The glasses in the 70s were like goggles.
I have to tell you, I was too young. I was born in 1964. So, I kind of remember. So today we're dealing with another concept of the 48 ways to wisdom. Just to remind everybody, when the Jewish people left Egypt, we were on our way towards the revelation at Mount Sinai, and we had to prepare. There was some preparation was necessary. And in the Mishna, which is the oral Torah, in the Mishna Pirkei Avot, chapter 6, most volumes it's Mishna 6, deals with very precise, I would say they're just words, but the words have meaning. So these words signify different pathways to acquiring wisdom. So if you've heard already many of the ways, if anybody who wants to truly live a life full of wisdom, to acquire the wisdom, takes practice, diligence, concentration, effort. I mean, there's no end to the words I can describe. It's effort, okay? And you have to make the effort. And these are the things that the Israelites, let's say, transformed from in the negativity, which we were, minus 49 levels, let's say, of impurity while we were in Egypt, unfortunately. And then in order to reach the 49th level of purity, we had to go through a transformation. So that was our experience, but we're here to share with the world, right? Anybody that wants to acquire wisdom could and should look at these ways, these pathways. So we're on number 15. Now the title is called Mishna. Mishna literally means, for us, it has every word in Hebrew has many definitions, many ways to explain it. Mishna, really, we're going to talk about, it means to learn or to review. Okay, so in our context, we're going to call it the oral law. What we have Mikra, which we did, I think that was last week. Mikra is the written, the scripture itself, which is to be read, which obviously means it was written down. Mishnah is to review. This is talking about the oral Torah, which you had a transmission of rabbi, let's say from Moses, our greatest rabbi, down to Joshua, through the 70 elders, and on through generation. It was not written down until around the year 200 by Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. We call him Rabbi. And that's what we call the Mishnah. But we're not going to really talk about why it was written down, although I might allude to it while we go along. But basically, oral Torah. So for 1,500 years, right? It was oral. It was only written down 1,800 years ago. So on one level, the word Mishna is just a direct a word describing what we call the oral Torah. But the oral Torah needs to be reviewed. Okay, the word Mishnah means reviewed, but also, like, let's say Mishnah Lamelech, right? Second in command. Second is also a concept of review, going over it again. Okay, so basically, he begins this chapter explaining how necessary it was that we had an oral Torah. Okay. So as he mentions, we all know there's a written Torah. That's the 5 books of Moses. But many people are not aware. They don't have the clue that there's such a thing as an oral Torah and how necessary it was. But the idea here, again, it's to review. In other words, how does one acquire wisdom? It's to review. It's to really internalize and to have at the tip of your tongue the information, so that not only is it useful, because the whole point is to use it, but also, I would imagine, to be able to help other people as well. So let's just go first to a particular verse. It is it's in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7.
Chapter 6, verse 7. Do you want me to read it, Rabbi?
Yeah, I just want you to enter. Okay, you don't have the Hebrew. I mean, you're not going to read the Hebrew. I'll read the Hebrew. Go ahead.
And you shall teach them to your sons and speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk on the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. Now,
Orthodox Jews, right, observant Jews, say this verse several times a day. It's in the Shema. Now, the first word is what I want to focus in on, and that is Vishinon Tom. Vishinon Tom means, it's like the same root as Mishneh. So just here in the Hebrew, Vishinon Tom Levanecha, we could say teach them, it's true. And it's something Vidibartabam, it's something you're going to speak it out. Literally, it says, right? Teach them by speaking about them. We're talking about the words of Torah, of course, what the Torah means. But Rashi here explains the word Vishinon Tam as an expression of sharpness. So even though we called it the oral Torah, Mishnah, and we say that it means review, but literally the word for a tooth, teeth, are shinaim, shina. So it's called like sharpness. When you have we all have a digestive system, Baruch Hashem, and there's many parts of it. I'm not, from the time of, let's say, maybe even the smelling, the food is coming, right? You're already, the juices are flowing, right? So that's maybe the salivas start to come. Saliva is part of the digestive system, right? You have your lips, your tongue, your teeth. It goes down, right? I mean, all the different biological aspects of the breaking down of the food coming down into the stomach. I'm not, really familiar with all the different aspects, but the teeth are actually part of the digestive system. Okay, so this is what we want to do. We want to acquire the Torah. We want to digest it, but you need something sharp to break it down. It's also part of the beginning process of the digestive system, breaking it down. So I'm going to go back again to the Rashi, and this is an expression of sharpness, meaning that these words should be sharply impressed in your mouth, so that if a person asks you something, you will not hesitate about it, but you will tell him immediately. Now, this is based on the Gemara in Kedushin 30a, which I will go into a little bit more. So why is this so important in terms of acquiring wisdom? So for those who are not familiar, this could be a great review for all those that are, let's say, past the initiation stage. We have 613 mitzvahs. That's for the Jewish people. For the non-Jews, there are, I'm going to say, only 7. Again, even though I say these numbers, it doesn't mean that there's only 613 mitzvahs, right? Many of these mitzvahs have subcategories, or let's say toldot, like, I guess subcategory is a good word, good description. So too with the 7, these are like 7 universal principles that have many subcategories.
Aspects, for sure.
Okay.
Practical application.
So I mentioned during the first 1,500 years of our history, the explanations of the 613 mitzvahs, meaning the actual explanations and all the subcategories, was all, let's say, oral. It was all oral and transmitted down from teacher to, or father to son, teacher to disciple. So I do want to just mention, and I discussed this before, how it was transmitted originally from God to Moses. Moses, for 40 years in the desert, right? He taught everyone else. So there's a sefer, there's a book called the Rambam's Perush HaMishnayos. Interesting. The term, the title of the book, it's Perush HaMishnayos. It's basically, I'll translate that, it's the explanation of the Mishnah, and that is his commentary on the Mishnah. Right. He begins by explaining unbelievably beautifully the transmission from Moses until Moses. His name, Maimonides, Rambam, is Moses. And he gives detailed from, Joshua down to we have what to call the judges, the time of the judges, down through the time of the kings, down through after King David, of course, and onward through all the prophets until the writing of the Mishna, and then onward through what we call the later sages, called the Amoraim. Like the Tanaim were the ones who wrote the Mishnah, and then you had the people who discussed it, and then the sealing of what we call the Talmud, and on until his own very self he describes. So this is something that I think anybody should look at and marvel at. Wow. I mean, it's written down, right? It's not a guessing game. It's not, random. This is recorded. I mean, I know people who know exactly who their great, like going on all the way to King David, all the way to Aaron Kohen, all the way back. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yes. There's plenty of Jews that have that. Unfortunately, because of what we call the exile, the persecutions, and the assimilation, much of that has been lost by a significant amount of Jews. But like I grew up, I knew my own grandfather and my great-grandparents, and they were kosher, right? My great-grandparents were, I wouldn't say they were rabbis, but they were known. They were well known. My mother said she used to walk by the synagogue and see her grandparents arguing, like, she called them professional daveners, meaning they were always in shul, they were always in synagogue. I know stories about my own great-grandfather. I only had met my great-grandmothers, so they had already passed on, my great-grandfathers, but after I became observant, I wanted to know more about them, and I met people that knew them and told me that whenever they were traveling businessmen, and they always kept Shabbat, and they kept kosher, and they were honest businessmen. It was a lot to be, proud of. And I have, certain, I would say documentation, but I have the names of the cities in Europe. So one day I will visit those places in Europe, and I've already seen tombstones of my great-grandparents' relatives.
Whereabouts?
So it's called, the place called Przyanka. It's a very small village outside of Kiev. Okay, so I know it's maybe I don't know if it's so safe just to walk around there today. I don't know what's going on with Russia and the Crimean War, but at some point I do plan to go. But anyway, back to the subject. So Moses taught Aaron, and Aaron listened, and he went to the side. He started on the left side of Moses, then he went on to the right side, and then his 2 sons came in, and then they heard, and then the elders came in, and then the people. So everything was reviewed. I'm just using this again. We spoke about this, reviewed 4 times. 4 times. And okay, we spoke about this at length in previous classes. But I just want to just sidestep for a second. If you go to Leviticus chapter 25, verse 1.
Verse 1 reads, And the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying,
Okay, really meant to, but it's okay.
2, Speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, when you come to the land that I am giving you, the land shall rest a Sabbath to the Lord.
So I really meant 1 and 2 together, because basically these 2 verses are telling us that God spoke to Moses Bihar Sinai, at this place called Har Sinai, saying the word. I just want you to know that over and over again, this is one of the most popular verses where it says Yidaber Hashem el Moshe Lamor. Forget the Har Sinai. This verse adds the word Har Sinai. What do you need the words Har Sinai here for? If God spoke to Moses, and the word is V'yidaber means something harsh, which I'm going to describe here. When I say harsh, I don't mean harsh, I mean concrete. Very, what's the word? As opposed to flexible, inflexible, right?
Okay.
Is that a word?
Strict.
Strict. That's the written Torah, is not flexible. You cannot change, you cannot add, you cannot subtract. There's something concrete and hard about the word V'yidaber. And that's what God spoke to Moses. He spoke to him. But it says lamor, to say over. I don't know if people are aware of that. You just read the English and says, okay, God spoke to Moses saying. No, God spoke to Moses to say. Obviously, Moses spoke and said, but the word emor is a flexible, is a soft language of speaking. Therefore, what Moses needed to do was to say over in the way that the person listening could understand, which means, I'm not saying he embellished in a sense of adding to the Torah, but he embellished in the sense of allowing the listener to comprehend. And that is what the oral Torah has been all along. There's always what we call a generation, I don't know if it's called a generation gap. There must be another term, but we can't always relate to our grandparents, right? There's something, I don't know, there's maybe only this generation, maybe in the past it was easier, right? But let's assume, rightfully so, that every generation or every other generation has a harder time relating to the previous generations. So the whole point of this transmission, it's so important. We read that first verse in Deuteronomy 6:7, how it's so important for the parents to teach it over. Also, there's an obligation for the grandparents. The question is, how great is that obligation? But there's great benefits. There's great rewards discussed when a grandparent teaches Torah to his. I'll tell you what it is. It says when a grandparent teaches over the Torah to his grandson, it's as if he's receiving that Torah directly from Mount Sinai.
Wow.
Now, the question is, who's the reward going to? In other words, think about the words. When a grandparent teaches the grandson, it's as if he's receiving the Torah right from Sinai. Now, at first glance, you must say, and it's the grandchild. I mean, you know what? I don't doubt that that's the reward that the grandchild will receive if he's already going back generations. But you know what? It's also the grandfather. By transmitting that valuable information to his grandchild, he will receive, what we say in Hebrew, siyata d'shmaya, assistance from Hashem, assistance from heaven, to be able to give it over, hopefully properly and correctly, which is one of the proofs, the amazing proofs that we're going to talk about tonight, that, I say tonight, wherever you are listening to this. And take, for example, tefillin. This is one of the greatest marvels, that our oral Torah is basically still integral, has a tremendous amount of integrity. I don't think, except maybe in this generation, some feminists making pink tefillin. But if you go back into all of history, you'll see no matter what country, no matter what time period, the tefillin are always the same dimensions. And it doesn't describe anywhere in our book. I say our book. I don't want to belittle in the Torah itself. I'll give you an example of what he wants to say. Like it says in the next verse, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 8. If you want to read that for us. I'm going to get back to the Har Sinai.
Deuteronomy chapter 6. Verse 8 reads, "And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be for ornaments between your eyes."
Now in the Hebrew it says totophos. Okay, even in English, if you want to leave it as ornaments, or as today it's called phylacteries. I mean, we call them in Hebrew tefillin. Okay, but what in the world are totophos? And so if you did not have this integral oral Torah being transmitted, you would find, the Rosh Yeshiva jokes about it, you would find some people, in different countries, different times, maybe it means your left shoe, you tie your left shoe on your forehead, or you tie a blue ribbon on your forehead, or, you could just imagine anything. I've seen it all. There are people that don't have any oral Torah. I'm not talking about Jews. I'm talking about people who are, I don't know where's the quote. I don't want to be too insulting, but I'll call it Mishagoyim, just crazy. I think they mean well, but they would wrap maybe a Sefer Torah around their forehead, right? How could you even see? How can you even walk? And not only that, it's not put here, but it's put above your hairline in this soft spot that when we were born, right, you can tell it from a new baby, there's a soft spot. It's right there on that soft spot between the hairline and the middle of the head towards the front. And it means between your eyes because it's going to be dead center. But how would you know what totophos were had there not been an oral Torah? I'm just saying that obviously there was something transmitted, and it was transmitted correctly for the last 3,500 years. Mm-hmm. Okay, it was written down 2,000 years ago, but nevertheless, before that, they have found, I don't know if it was Masada or other places, they have found along the coast in Israel. There's a lot of archaeological sites that they have found tefillin, old tefillin, and it's all the same as we have today. It's just unbelievable. Now, I just want to go back to this idea of Har Sinai a second, because we read in chapter, I think it's 25 of Leviticus, there were two statements. One was the addition of Har Sinai. So not only do we have God spoke to Moses, i.e. we'll call it the written Torah, the Torah that we have, as well as Lamor to say over, but this verse adds in the words Har Sinai. And then if you go through the whole chapter 25, you're going to find so many details about what we call Shemitah, right? This rest, the land shall rest as a Sabbath to the Lord. Well, guess what? All of it, and I'm going to A-L-L, all of the Torah, all of the 613 mitzvahs were given over, and all of their explanations were given, but not all of their explanations are written in the Torah. I just used that as an example with tefillin. I can give you another one, right? We all know that Jews cannot just go ahead and go hunting and eat what they trap. They have to slaughter the animal in a certain way, and that is in our oral Torah. But it says in the written Torah, right, you shall eat these animals as I have instructed you, and you do not see anywhere about all the different laws, meaning the details of the slaughtering or koshering process. Here's just another example. And yet all over the world, all Jews are in agreement of what those slaughtering processes are. So obviously, there's an oral Torah. Whether you, as an outsider, not you personally, I'm saying whoever's listening, as an outsider wants to say, well, what's that to me? Well, the whole concept, I'm going to say the whole concept, these 7 Noahide laws, to a great degree, you're relying on our constant transmission, right? I've heard it said, I'm not saying I believe it, I'm just telling you there are rumors, there are people who are against the 7 Noahide laws and say it's a Jewish invention, right? And it's not only ancient, it's something new, it's something modern. Well, guess what? I mean, I have Sfarim that are, 2,000 years old in my house. Not the actual book. I'm saying reprints, right, from the Midrash, the Gemara, the Mishnayos are 1,800, 1,500 years old, and they're discussing the transmission before that point, and they discuss what they call Ben and Noach, the words Ben Noach. So today, if someone, Noahide doesn't appear anywhere, well, I'm not so sure. If we call it Ben Noach, it's just a modern translation of someone who has adopted, right, these laws, not just the laws, the whole philosophy, because the philosophy is by a Jew. If a Jew does not believe that the book, this I can't call it a book, the Mikra, the 5 books of Moses, is from heaven, he may or she may not end up in heaven. In other words, it's measure for measure. If you don't believe that the Torah is the same Torah, if you don't believe this Torah is from heaven, right, so then you may be forfeiting your Olam Haba. I will profess to you that I absolutely believe this is applicable to the non-Jew as well, meaning the righteous Noahide. You want to be a righteous Noahide? You want to go to heaven? Well, I'm going to hate to break the news to you. You have to believe. I'm not telling you you have to. I'm just saying if you want to buy into this Jewish tradition that we have, Jewish tradition says, by a Jew, guess what? That same Mishnah, the same Mishnah in Sanhedrin that discusses that, later on in the Talmud goes on and discusses non-Jews as well. Bilam is included, and he's not a Jew, in whether he gets Olam Haba or not. He's actually excluded. He doesn't get Olam Haba. Okay, so this exclusion, I don't want to get too technical, but can you imagine that it says all Jews will have a place in the world to come, except for, and it lists all kinds of principles. One of those principles is believing that the Torah was from heaven. And then it lists certain kings and certain regular people who are excluded. Again, they're not just people, they're principles, the kind of lives they lived, or the beliefs they had. They're excluded. Bilam, who's a non-Jew, is explicitly mentioned as being excluded. And this is where we know that all other, meaning there's 8 billion people on the planet, right? All other people are actually could be included, right? But again, they would have to believe the same thing that a Jew would believe. That what? That the Torah was revealed at Sinai with the oral law that we still have today. So I know that's a very difficult thing. I get it, because most of these Christians were either brainwashed or whatever. There's a lot of fake news out there, right? And it's very difficult to believe that the Jews have this continuous transmission. I mean, they're taught to believe the Jews have a veil over their eyes, that they are, I don't know, I don't want to say the horrible things that the New Testament speaks about in terms of Jews. For those who are familiar, you know what I'm talking about. That we are partners with the devil, right?
Synagogue of Satan, yeah.
We're the synagogue of Satan, that we are the real, true Antichrist, whatever that means, Couldn't be further from the truth, because we are the real messengers of the concept of the Messiah, right? They don't even have a clue, basically, what the Jewish Messiah is all about, because they're taught, what do they have to offer us? Unfortunately. Okay, so going back, so this whole idea that not only was Shemitah, the sabbatical year, given over with all its details at Mount Sinai, but the entire Torah, right? Just to give you an example, when we get back, let's say to Deuteronomy, chapter 1, verse 3, all the way to 5. Let's see what that has to say.
1 verse 3 says, "It came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first of the month, that Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all that the Lord had commanded him regarding them." After
So
he had,
this is 1 month, or it's really whatever. Let's say it's 2 months before he passes on. One second. It's a month before he passes on. Okay. Um, he passed. It's a month and a week. Let's say he passed away on the 7th of Adar. So you're talking about the beginning of the 11th month. Moses passed away in the 7th day of the 12th month. So it's a month and a week. And what is he asking them? This is when he's going to tell them. Let's go on. Let's read the next two verses. It was really it's
after
really
he had smitten,
yeah, keep going.
after he had smitten Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan.
You know what? I'm sorry. Let's just stop here. Let's just use this verse, right? It came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first of the month. What did Moses do? Moses spoke. It says in Hebrew, Diber Moshe el bnei Israel. Moses spoke to the children of Israel, Kekol, everything according Asher Tziva Hashem Oto Aleim. So he wanted to make sure before his passing that if there were any questions, if there were any doubts, if there was any things that needed clarification, now is the time. So we have from Leviticus chapter 25, where God spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai everything. And it could be, I have no qualms, that we're talking about like a yeshiva for the next 39 years. The learning continued. But by the end, this is the end, there is a review. This concept is called, what would anybody know it Deuteronomy is called? Why is it called Deuteronomy? It's called Mishna Torah. Even though the Rambam later on, we're only talking about 1,000 years ago, wrote a series of books called Mishna Torah. He also said this is a review of the Torah. But here, Deuteronomy. So I don't know that much about Latin or Greek. Deuteronomy. What is do? Okay, I don't know, but I know that it's based on this idea of
I thought it was
review.
two.
No, well, even if it is two, Mishnah means second. Mishneh is like second in command, like I said, and Mishnah Lamelech means the second in command. That's what Mordechai was elevated to. Also, you have Yosef was basically Mishnah Melech. Mishneh in modern Hebrew means the second in command. Second think of it as review, right? It's a second time. We did it the first time, now we're going over it. Okay? So Deuteronomy is, look into it, okay? I know this is
yeah, no, it makes sense. I see where you're going, yeah.
So that's called Mishnah Torah. The Mishnah is a review. And so everything in between was a learning process. And that's what I wanted to get across to you guys. Okay. So basically,
second law or repeated law, yeah. It's from a Septuagint's Greek title. Septuagint's Greek title to the book Deuteronomion, meaning second law or repeated law, a name tied to one of the Hebrew appellations for the book Mishnah Torah. Exactly.
So you call second or repeated? It's the same thing, second time. Or okay. So one of the main points the Roshi wants to get across is that any piece of wisdom, you have to constantly review it. So he asked his students, okay, like how old are you, right? He was giving a class, they're in their 20s, 23, 27, whatever age you are. Have you learned any important lessons in life? So he put them on the spot, and they had nothing to answer, right? Okay. But if you give enough thought to it, and you really sit down and think about the most important lessons, you could probably come up with maybe 10 or 20 very important lessons. I mean, this is time you spent on the earth. Think about these lessons, have them written down, and review them. Because, we don't want to make the same mistakes over again. You learn some valuable lessons. When I say valuable, it could have been valuable, right? It could have been a loss of money, time, God forbid, right? How are lessons learned? Sometimes there's losses involved. You don't want to have to keep learning those lessons over again. Sit down, concentrate, and this is what the Jewish people have done. I mean, just think about all the prophets. The prophets are going over the mistakes that the Jewish people failed to learn. And this is called the Bible. We call it the Bible, right? Tanakh. So we constantly review the lessons that the prophets have told us as well. So one thing that anybody should do is try to make a list and of your own wisdom, things that you've picked up in your, short time on this planet, right? So another idea is like if you were going on a plane, right? You get on the plane. Today, I don't think they leave the cockpit open. It used to be you get on, you can say hi to maybe they still do. I don't know.
The pilot, one time, yeah.
What do they call that? The terror and hostages and hijackings. They probably have a different protocol. But, they used to smoke on the planes. Forget about that. So I don't know. Let's just assume the cockpit is open and you're walking in and the guy has a list. He has a checklist. Imagine he says, you know what? I'm tired of this checklist. Let's just fly the plane. No, it could take a half an hour. Maybe it's 20 minutes. I don't know. Even if it's 15. I don't care if it's 5 minutes. He's got a checklist. Is this light on? Does this work? Does this work? Yeah. They check things out. It's a good idea. You're talking about life or death here. So if that works for, you're taking responsibility for, it could be up to 300 some people, it makes sense that you want to take a checklist with you as a pilot and make sure everything's running good. So too in life. This is really very important. And that's basically what the Mishna is. That's the checklist for the Jewish people. He gives another example. We'll get to it. Okay. He wants to emphasize over and over again, because this is our checklist for daily living. God gave us the manual. We spoke about this before. You can go back and review these ideas, right? If you got a computer, right? And that might be a bad example, because today we all know how to work a computer. But let's say you ordered a refrigerator, one of these high-tech refrigerators. It comes with a manual. If you were trying to figure it out, I don't know, you might ruin the food, right? If it's not at the right temperature, or if it's not set properly. So anytime you acquire something, you basically get a manual, and the Torah is our manual for living. Now, there will be contradictions. Here's a contradiction, for example. I just have to find it. I can't find it here, but I'll try to remember what he said. So, for example, it says, right, love humanity. You have this concept, loving humanity. That's really what the Torah is all about, believe it or not. Do you love humanity? On the other hand, there's another statement that talks about killing your enemies. So you have these, I'll call them seeming contradictions. Love humanity. When your enemy comes to strike, you strike him first. Whatever it is about your enemy, you have to take him out. So is that loving humanity? How do I deal with this? It's like a seeming contradiction. Now, I can ask you, could you love humanity and hate your enemy at the same time? I can say yes, because I figured it out. But you will find in life contradictions. Well, this is why we have a checklist. We have to know what is the priority, how to go about doing it, and how to resolve what we call contradictions. Okay? How important it is, huh? Sorry?
I said for sure. There's got to be clear and understandable logic to overcome apparent contradictions that are only surface level. It's got to be resolvable. Sure.
Okay. I'm just looking at this verse a second. I'm not sure it's that verse. It may be a different verse. It's actually... Let me just look at 1 second. It is here. Number 10. Okay. Go to Numbers 21:14.
Numbers 21:14 reads, "Concerning this, it is told in account of the wars of the Lord, what he gave at the sea of reeds and the streams of Arnon, excuse me."
Okay. So I just want to relate something. That when one approaches, you're trying to gain wisdom, you find, like I said, these contradictions. I discussed before what it's like in a Jewish study hall. The decibel level is beyond the charts, right? You go into any library in America or wherever you are, a library is like hush, hush. You know, even if you like don't pick up a chair and move it, you scratch the chair against the floor, everyone's going to look at you like you're diseased or
Interrupting
something.
them, yeah.
No, people are there to concentrate. But Judaism, I'm not saying we're not about concentrations, but we're working it out with a study partner. Now, this verse, I just want to show you something about this verse. I just want to mention the question is asked about a certain verse, and that verse, I'll tell you in a second, verse 7. Second.
Of the same chapter?
No. It's something else. I just want to. I'll just mention it. Don't pay too much attention to it. The verse says, I'll tell you where it is. It is number 6. It's in Psalms 127:5. You don't have to read it. I just mentioned about it. It's talking about praiseworthy is the man who fills his quiver with them. They shall not be shamed when they speak with enemies in the gate. We're discussing at this time because the word shinun is used about these arrows. The arrows are constantly sharp, and this verse is discussing, believe it or not, this idea of who's the enemies in your gate. It's actually the other rabbis who are you're having a not just a philosophical or halakhic discussion, but you're trying to get to the truth. So our verse, which I just mentioned, that is in Numbers, what did we say it was? The one we're in right now?
Numbers, we're in chapter 21:14.
Concerning this, it is told of the account of the wars of the Lord. Al Kain Yomer B'Sefer Milchamot Hashem. This is talking about people who are at war, okay? Not always in the external sense, but in the internal sense, meaning two rabbis arguing it out. It says, Et v'hev b'sufa. Now, in English, it just means what he gave, the word v'hev, at the Sea of Reeds. However, the explanation here is that we're talking about that when even a father and a son, or a teacher and a student are studying Torah together in one gate, at first they become enemies, one to another. They do not move from there until they become devoted friends one to another. As the verse says, V'hav b'sufa, v'hav, or v'hev b'sufa. And one gives, but the word is b'sufa at the end, meaning the word ahava, lovers, they become lovers at the end. So in the beginning, they're like fighting, but in the end, they become lovers. This is someone who's really looking for truth and has that from the very beginning, knows that they're going to eventually come, even if they disagree. They're going to disagree with respect. They're going to try their best not to convince the other person they're right, but to try to convince themselves that they might be wrong. I want to look at it with a whole objective perspective. Try to come to the truth. That's the goal. So I just want to go back. In this particular Gemara, in Gemara Kedushin 30, it's really 30 at the A at the bottom, the last few sentences, and it says like this. It uses our word, vishinantam, and you shall teach them thoroughly. The Gemara says, Shayu divrei Torah muchudadam beficha, that the words of the Torah should be sharply boned in your mouth. I don't know what that means, boned, but I know, honed, okay. Sharply honed, meaning so sharp, right, in your mouth. I get that. That she'im yish'al lecha adam davar, that if somebody asks you a question, al tigam gam the tomer lo, do not, I'm going to say either hesitate or stutter. They translate this as stammering, but I would translate it as either hesitating or stuttering. Don't stutter or hesitate, but say to him, Ella, rather, what should you do? Em amur lo miyad. Say to him immediately. Shenemar, as the verse says. Now, these are two verses I would like you to read. The first verse is interesting, where it doesn't say. Okay, it does. It's Proverbs 7:4, and then we're going to go back to 7:3. But okay, let's start with 7:4.
Oops, I'm in the wrong spot here. Proverbs 7:4.
Yeah.
7:4 reads, Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and you shall call understanding a kinsman.
Now, let me just open it up. 7:4. It says like this idea in Hebrew, where it says, Emor lechachma, say to wisdom, achotiat, you are my sister. I think I described before to you one of the Rosh Hashiva's famous expressions called five-finger clarity. How do you know what you know? I know I have 5 fingers on this hand, right? That's how I know. Whatever I know, that's how clear I know it. Just like I'm looking at my hand, I know I have 5 fingers, that's how I know. Well, guess what? You know what this verse is telling me?
Unmistakable.
You're going to flip out. You have to have your seatbelt on. Say to wisdom, you are my sister. Ready? You have to know whatever you acquire, you should know, obviously through review and clarification. You should know so well, just like you know that your sister is forbidden to you. You know your sister's forbidden to you for marriage, for anything else. So that's how you have to know your wisdom. Someone woke you up in the middle of the night. Hey, are you allowed to marry your sister? You're going to say, what? Get out of here. Are you kidding me? Of course not, right? That's how clear every other piece of wisdom should be, just like that. So let me just give you the comment here on the Gemara. This verse is taken to convey that one should have as immediate a grasp on Torah wisdom as he does of the fact that he is forbidden to marry his sister. Alternatively, now there's another part of the verse, and let me just see where it is. It's verse 3, actually. We'll go to verse... No, sorry. The continuation of verse 4. It says, Umoda labina tikra, right, which means like this, and you shall call understanding a kinsman. Now, I'm not sure what that means, but the word moda'ah is intimacy. So maybe that's what the word moda'ah, like we said, the God that Adam knew his wife, right? That's called da'at, right? Intimate knowledge, right? When you meet somebody in Israel on the street, and then you tell them, oh yeah, I know them, you wouldn't use the Hebrew word da'at, you would use makir. I recognize them. It sounds very strange, right? I'm just in Hebrew. Ani makir, it means I know that woman. I recognize her. I shouldn't say I recognize her. You would only say that about your wife, someone who's you're intimate with, that you know that person. I'm talking in the Hebrew language, Lashon HaKodesh. So here it says umoda labina, that intimate Here he says kinsman, but okay, and that intimacy of Bina's understanding, you shall call. So the way they translate it, you shall call understanding this intimate relationship. So he goes on, he says, about the end of the verse, I'll tell you what his translation is. And call understanding your close acquaintance. The latter part of the passage would imply that one should be well acquainted with understanding of the Torah. Okay. Now, there's another verse I mentioned. Now, look back to number 3. In other words, chapter 7 in Proverbs, verse 3. You read it, and I'll say the Hebrew.
Bind them on your fingers, inscribe them on the tablet of your heart.
Okay, so in Hebrew, ksharein, it's like almost like command form, to bind them, really to tie them, to tie. You know, when you have well, today we have all kinds of notes. We can have a cell phone. We can have WhatsApp. I'm walking through the store with my shopping list that's on my WhatsApp, right? But okay, so if your wife was, sent you out with a list, you have a list, or she tells you, don't forget, she puts a little red string on your finger, right? Don't forget to buy whatever it is
elastic
that she really wants, right? Don't forget to come home with this. She really wants it. So bind them on your fingers, kasharem alatz botecha, kasvem aluach libecha. Inscribe them on the tablet. I mean, we're talking about, look at just verse 2, keep my commandments and live, right? Right? This is all about, and my instruction like the apple of your eyes. Bind them. What are we talking about? Binding the Torah on your fingers, inscribe them on the tablet of your heart. We're talking about wisdom. Okay, so this is something that you can only really acquire through constant review. Again, review after you've made the clarification. Very important. I just wanted to get that across. Another thing that the rabbi really wanted to get through to everybody is this idea of the 4 levels of what we call the pardes. You go into the orchard. Pardes in modern Hebrew is orchard, right? Not modern Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, doesn't matter. It's Hebrew. And it means when you go into the depth of the written Torah, you're going into multi-layered levels, okay? So pshat means the simple understanding. Drush is like medrash, it's a homiletic source. We're gonna talk about each one of these. Remez, which are hints, and sod, which are hidden mystical meanings. So it's important to know these exist. Pardes, going into the orchard, going to the Garden of Eden, so to speak, right? So pshat, Rashi does help us with pshat. Pshat, again, means the simple explanation of what the Torah is actually saying. And Rashi told us that that's what he's going to try to do. But interestingly enough, if you ever look at Rashi, almost everything he is saying, there's a quote where he's getting it from, and he's mostly bringing midrash. So the midrash is expounding on the anomalies within the text. The text has words that are, okay, in order, it's true. Sometimes they're out of order. In other words, that's not the way people speak, or it's not spelled the way that in grammar it should be spelled. Remember, there's no vowels and it could say anything, but there's a meaning behind the very fact that there's an extra letter or there's a letter missing. I'm saying from grammatical point of view. Obviously, it's not missing from the Torah. Or why this particular word is used when a more common word could have been used.
Right.
Or it's the first time and only time this word is used. So the drush, which is the next level, a lot of time goes into that, and that's what Rashi's using. He had at his fingertips all of the oral Torah, and he chose one particular example from the whole oral Torah to tell you that is the best way to explain the pshat. But he got it from a drush. So understand that even on a pshat level, simple level, it's very complicated. You need the oral Torah, period. And that's another thing that I tell my students, the ones who are B'nai Noach. Obviously, the ones who are converting have a whole nother system. But the ones who want to remain B'nai Noach, they're almost afraid. There's a fear. Oh my God, it says I shouldn't involve myself in Torah. Well, what does that mean? I'll just review. We spoke about these ideas before. Everyone agrees that they're allowed to read and study what we call the written, right? The Tanakh, right? The Nach for sure, the Tuf, the Torah itself, no problem. What about the oral Torah? Well, guess what? There's no way you can understand even the written Torah without whatever part of the oral Torah is explaining it.
Yeah.
So stick with Rashi to start with, but you're going to go into, and hopefully you're inquisitive enough, you're curious enough, where did Rashi get that from? What was bothering Rashi? Why? And you'll learn Hebrew, you'll learn how Jews think. There's nothing wrong with learning how Jews think, right? Especially if you're attaching yourself to the Jewish people. So there's so much you can learn just from the Tanakh. You don't have to go and start learning, Mar Nevuchim. I mean, you can, right? There's plenty of other philosophical books that I think you should learn. But in terms of starting with the Tanakh itself, you cannot take it at face value, right? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The Jews never behaved like that. That's not what it means. Okay, I mean, that's like Judaism 101. Everybody knows it's financial compensation for various things, not just physical damage. There's also emotional damage. There's pain, right? There's doctor's bills. There's unemployment benefits. It's all kinds of insurance. Okay, so know that if you're really open to know what the Tanakh says, you have to know there's an oral Torah, and it has integrity. You can believe that's what the Torah says. You don't like what it says. Okay, so then have a discussion, further discussion with your LOR, local Orthodox rabbi, right? Find out what it really means. Okay, so that's Pshat. Then Drush, as I already explained, is a little bit a homiletical source for biblical concepts and explains how to apply them to living. Remez is more, it really means hints, but it's a more sophisticated level of medrash, where different word pronunciations reveal different meanings. One of the explanations I gave before, and I'm happy to give it again, the word marasha, right? That this is that Moses, right? This is something that Moses commanded. This was received by Moses and given over as an inheritance to the Jewish people. The word marasha means inheritance, but it also means morasa. Morasa with the shin can be turned into a sin, or a samach in this case. It means betrothed. We spoke about the idea that, and this is really what I want to emphasize now, there's different levels to this, that one of the 7 Noahide laws is do not steal. Now, if this is inheritance to the Jewish people, that means if you don't recognize it as an inheritance to Jewish people, you think it's yours, that's called stealing. If it's theirs and I'm using their explanation and I'm staying true to form, that is perfectly fine to study the word according to the way it was given over. I'm not stealing it. I am not, what's the word,
you're recognizing it for what it is.
Yeah, but plagiarism is like saying I take a quote and I incorporate and make it like it's my own. Yeah. I don't mean plagiarism in that sense, but I mean taking something that was given to someone else and claiming it as your own. So that is stealing. But on the other hand, the same word is morasa as a betrothal, that the tablets, that the 613, that the whole Torah itself is the is like the dowry, is the brit, it's the covenant that connects the Jewish people with their God. And if you again incorporate it and saying I'm part of this relationship when you're not, that's called adultery, right? Because this is a male-female, God with his bride, the Jewish people, and you're involving yourself in a relationship you have no part of. But again, so there's an idea of adultery. Adultery is one of the 7 Noahide laws, right? So you have to be careful to make sure that only that which is permissible to you, you study. And the truth be told, there's so much more, right? A non-Jew can set up a Jewish court, a non-Jewish court and use Jewish law. So there's so much. You see the books behind me. The Shulchan Aruch, right? Hoshen Mishpat. So many. You can decide you want to keep any of the laws, like keeping kosher. The Rambam says, if you're going to do it right. Like, in other words, you're doing it for the sake of receiving a reward. You want to keep kosher, do it right. You have to learn. So there is a lot you can learn. But so anyway, that's Remez is dealing with like the word marasha or marasa, and it can reveal different meanings. Remember, the Torah scroll is not vowelized, which obviously allows different pronunciations and elucidations. But this was given to us. Sod. Sod is the final of those 4 letters, pardes, pei for pshat, resh, pardes, right? It's for remez, then drush, and then the last one is sod, samich, and that is the hidden mystical meaning of the universe, mainly explained in the Kabbalistic texts, such as the Zohar. Okay, I really didn't go through everything. I had some other interesting source material. I do want to, I guess, end with one idea of the 13 Harmonical Principles. The 13 Harmonical Principles, in other words, people might ask, do you mean you received the entire spectrum of what we call the oral Torah? I'm going to say absolutely, but with some caveat. You know, how would a Jewish court decide today how to use electricity, or let's say an elevator? There's such a Shabbat elevator on Shabbat. And how it works, I don't know the exact technique, but I do know that basically it's set up that it's preset to land on certain floors, let's say in a hotel. So it might go every other floor on the way up, and then on the way down it's just straight down.
Evens and odds, yeah.
Might just go straight up and then different floors on the way down. But it doesn't work according to the weight. Normally, the way elevators do work is if 5 people get on or 1 person gets on, it's going to use a different amount of energy. Or however the weight system works, there's something that's unique to each time that it's being used. But the way the Shabbos elevator is going to work is that it's preset, and it will not work in the normal way that if 5 people get on or 3 people get on, it's going to work differently. No, it's going to work the same way, whether 1 person or 5 people get on. So you're not affecting it, okay? There's some people that don't even believe in these things, but how would it be determined how one could work? Because these are principles that we learned at Mount Sinai. And that's going to be the point, that even if you don't believe, and I'm not saying I believe or not believe, it's irrelevant. I do believe that the 13 Harmonical Principles, the way that we derive the laws, were given so that in future generations, these dilemmas could be resolved. And they're resolved based on the majority. So there is a very important part of this information I want to give over to you, and that is based on, we find it in Deuteronomy. Let me just get the quotes here. I don't have all my sheets here, do I? Whenever there's a dilemma, right? You're sitting in your town and a issue of Jewish law comes up, so you go to the court. Now, if the court can figure it out, great. But if it's too much beyond them, we know that there's higher courts, right? Each city then they had your counties or let's say your tribal areas. And then beyond that, it might have to go to the Supreme Court all the way to Jerusalem, and would have to be decided on a deeper level. So I'm just trying to find the, sorry, give me 1 second.
As
I don't
much
know
time as you
why.
need.
Huh?
You have as much time as you need.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you where we're going to find this. We're going to find this probably in chapter 13 of Deuteronomy. And
I love verse 1. Everything I command you that you shall be careful to do it, you shall neither add to it nor subtract from it.
yeah, but let me just find the verses. Um, one second. Here it is. Okay, it's not 13. 1 second. Let's go to 17 or 18. 17. Okay, 17, and it is verse 8. Now, we discussed these ideas before. If you allow me just to read it, just for time's sake. If a matter of judgment is hidden from you, so the judgment, like I said, you're starting in your own city, and you have a personal issue. So the judgment is hidden from you. It's either not clear in the Torah, or it's not clear, between blood and blood, between verdict and verdict, between plague and plague, matters of dispute in your cities, you shall rise up and ascend to the place that Hashem, your God, shall choose. That means Jerusalem, to the highest court. You shall come to the Kohanim, the Levites, and to the judge who will be in those days. And you shall inquire. Now, so this requires you to speak it out, to show evidence, and try to figure it out. Remember, the lower courts were not able to, so the higher court should be able to do something, right? You need clarity. You can't live your life without clarity. You're going to inquire, and they will tell you. Telling you means they're not showing you inside the book. Obviously, it's a doubt. If it was in the book, there's no doubt. And why wouldn't the lower court be able to show it to you? So the very fact that there's a doubt, you don't know what to do, it means it's not written anywhere. You're going to inquire. They're going to tell you the word of judgment. And what do? You do according to what? To the word. The word means spoken word. That they tell you. Again, there's a word they're going to tell you. Al pi hadavar asher yagidu lecha. According to the mouth that is speaking, you, right? That's what you're going to do, whatever they tell you to do, from the place that Hashem will choose. Now, you have to be careful to do everything according to everything that they teach you. This idea, they're going to teach you something. Again, who are they? This is what God commands. This is the commandments from, I'm reading it right out of the Torah, right? You're in doubt. You don't know what to do. You go to the court. They don't know what to do. I mean, if it's black and white, there's no problem. We're going to eventually go what? According to whatever they tell you. We're going to call that the oral law. And then verse 11, according to the teaching that they teach you, according to the judgment they will say to you, you shall do. Of course, what do you mean? Of course there's an oral Torah. And there's a central body called the Sanhedrin, or the Great Court. You shall not deviate from the word. How many times do I have to say the word word, or the word mouth, or the word speaking it out, teaching you? You shall not deviate from the word that they will tell you, right or left. I'll stop there. We also know that you go according to the majority of the Sanhedrin, right? The Sanhedrin itself, it consists of 71 people, right? You have 70, and then you have the head. But if you have 35, 36, that's how it's going to be determined. You're going to go by the majority. Once the majority decides, we say the Sanhedrin says. I understand you can have a minority report, right? Today in the Supreme Court of the United States, they do publish I think it's called, I don't know what it's called. Maybe it's not called the minority report. But in other words, the minority opinion, right? The minority opinion, it goes down. At least they got to voice their opinion. But in the end, even the minority, the bottom line is the court made a judgment. So too here too, right? As the verse says, where is it? It's in Exodus chapter 23, verse 2.
Forgive me, I was just taking some notes. Exodus chapter 23, verse 2 reads, "You shall not follow the majority for evil, and you shall not respond concerning a lawsuit to follow many to pervert justice."
Now, when it says you shall not follow the majority to do evil, again, we're relying on we were there. We're the witnesses. We're the J witnesses. We're the real, the JOHAV, whatever. We're the real witnesses to the Yud K Vav K. We were there. We stood at the revelation. And when we heard these words, you shall not follow the majority to do evil, we understood that also. The main meaning is you should follow the majority for good. And that is the Sanhedrin, right? The Sanhedrin are the eyes of the congregation. And they determine the law, as we just read in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 8 onward, that you should follow the majority, right? 36 verses 35, or it's whatever, 99 to 1, 99% to whatever, you follow the majority, and that is the din of the Sanhedrin. And they would use the 13 harmonical principles that we received at Har Sinai to develop, we'll call the oral Torah, to develop halacha. Yeah, you go ahead. You had a question?
Well, I was hoping you could elaborate on the second half of the chapter 23:2 of Exodus there. And you shall not respond concerning a lawsuit to follow many to pervert justice. If you could elaborate on that for me.
Which verse is it?
Exodus chapter 23, verse 2, right? Where it said, you shall not follow the majority for evil. But the second half of the verse reads, and you shall not respond concerning a lawsuit to follow many to pervert justice. I mean, I can.
I'm going to have to think about. I see here. Rashi says, and if the litigant asks you about that corrupted judgment, do not answer him concerning the lawsuit with an answer that follows those many to pervert the judgment from its true ruling, but tell the judgment as it is, and let the neck iron hang on the neck of the many. I'm not sure. I have to think about that, but I think that
no, Rashi gives an idea. Enough. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Rabbi.
This guy Raskin, who was the one who wasn't Raskin, was it? No, this guy Tapper on CNN. I think he's Jewish. I can't believe it. Anyway, so when Trump's lawyer wanted to leave Friday early, it happened to have been Parshat Mishpatim, and he wrote. I don't know, it was a tweet or a letter of some sort that he couldn't believe that this Orthodox Jew was defending a criminal in his eyes, some criminal, that he was going home to spend Shabbat at home, but in the meantime, he was defending evil. Like, I don't know, it was just the craziest thing, because he wrote it in Hebrew as well. Like, I think Tapper from CNN. It's just so amazing how corrupt the system is. People are, but you can obviously. I mean, Dershowitz speaks about it all the time, at least in America, that everyone has a right. You're innocent until proven guilty, and everyone has a right to a good defense. And I mean, obviously, we all are aware. I stay out of politics, and I hope that we don't get in trouble for this. But we are aware you can't stick your head under the sand that he was acquitted. So if he was acquitted according to their rules, then he was found to be not guilty. That's clear. I don't have to. I'm not defending anyone. I was just so surprised that one Jew was pitted against another Jew by claiming that he is defending evil. First of all, you're innocent until proven guilty. And anyway, we won't go any more into that. But it's the first part of that verse. Do not follow the majority for evil simultaneously. You do. Here, look at Rashi right there. There are halakhic interpretations for this verse given by the sages of Israel, but the language of the verse does not fit its context according to them. But here the sages, expounded that we may decide unfavorably for the defendant by a majority created by one judge. They interpreted the end of the verse, Achere Rabim Lahatos, that means after the majority you shall decide, to mean that if those judges voting that the defendant is guilty outnumbered those voting that the defendant is innocent by 2. By the way, when I mentioned about 35 verses 36, that is in regular cases. When it comes to death penalty, you have to have a majority of 2. Okay? The verdict is to be decided unfavorably according to the majority's opinion. All right. The text speaks of capital cases. Okay, but in monetary cases, a majority of 1 is necessary. So you already see when we're talking about a majority of a court. So this tells you that when it comes to a death penalty, you must have a majority of 2, meaning can't be 35, 36. It has to be 37, 34, right? Makes sense? Okay, but when it comes to monetary cases, then a majority of 1 is okay. Okay, so there's a lot to learn, and that's, it takes a lot of humility to understand that we're coming from a place of innocence. You want to know the truth. Well, you have to go to the people that understood. They were there, and this, at least if you're interested in what they have to say, right? They, the Jews, right? What they have to say. If you want to be closed-minded and say, look, I'll take the Torah as my own, I'll interpret it as I want, then, I think you believe you've blown a medication and in a mental hospital, honestly. Because, let's say, you took the manual from this, you bought a brand new, computer, and you took the manual, and you said, I'll just read it and apply it to myself. I'll make Messiah, I'll make a whole religion out of a manual for a computer. That's really what they're doing, because it was given to us, it was given to the Jewish people as a safekeeping, as to be a guardian, and we are responsible for its transmission, of course, as we've been speaking about, right? For its clarification, for its application, and the Torah itself says it over and over again. So anybody who starts to read it should come, and I meet people all the time and say, I can't believe my whole life. They are so thrilled to be learning the truth, right? We're learning Chumash with Rashi. And they're like, I'm just blown away. This is amazing. I've been taught my whole life this means something else. And now I'm looking at it with, my own eyes in the original. And it's just fascinating. And it changes their lives, right? Their whole lives now have meaning. Anyway, so hopefully people will pay attention, learn a little bit of Hebrew. There's so many classes online today, right? You can find anywhere on YouTube. Just go to h.com, go to Ursamea, go to Chabad. That's like 3 of tens of thousands, right? Those are the top sites. And of course, Yibaneh.
Yibaneh.com, yes. And I know you've been showing more of Rabbi Breitowitz there on your Yibaneh.com. Beautiful messages he shares. I enjoy every one I get to catch. But I am thankful that you're willing to share this Beyond the 7 class. And I think you started it off really on the right foot here today about review. You just can't get enough.
Bezrat Hashem, we'll just continue to review. Okay.
All right. Well, so Hashem willing, we're on next week, Rabbi. But then you've got Passover coming up in a couple of weeks. So Hashem willing, we're going to be here same time next week, then, folks.
Sure.
But